In pursuit of a higher growth path that is aligned with the President's administration's 8-point socio-economic agenda and in accordance with Republic Act No. 7656 or the Dividend Law, Secretary Recto has requested GOCCs to increase their dividend remittances from a minimum of 50% to 75% on 2023 net earnings. The remittances have substantially contributed to the non-tax revenue of the national government, and today we shall recognize all who have contributed their part in nation building, who went above and beyond the call of duty in service of the Filipino people. At this point, we shall be awarding the Certificate of Recognition to our 47 GOCCs, which have remitted a total of 88.56 billion pesos. May we request the President to kindly lead the awarding of the Certificates of Recognition to the representatives of each GOCC. Likewise, may we request Executive Secretary Bersamin and Secretary Recto to please assist the President. May we call on the Land Bank of the Philippines with actual remittance of 32.12 billion, headed by President and Chief Executive Officer Maria Lynette V. Ortiz. LBP is chaired by the DOF Secretary Recto. Thank you, LBP. The Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation with actual remittance of 10.68 billion, headed by President and Chief Executive Officer Roberto B. Tan. PDIC is chaired by BSP Governor Remolona. Thank you, PDIC. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas with initial remittance of 9.2 billion, headed by Chairman of the Monetary Board and Governor Eli M. Remolona Jr. Thank you, BSP. The Philippine Ports Authority with actual remittance of 5.06 billion, headed by General Manager J. Daniel R. Santiago. The PPA is chaired by DOTR Secretary Jaime Bautista. Thank you, PPA. The Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation with actual remittance of 4.60 billion pesos, headed by Chairman and Chief Executive Officer Alejandro H. Tenco. Thank you, PAGCOR. The Manila International Airport Authority with actual remittance of 3.46 billion pesos, headed by General Manager Eric Jose C. Ines. The MIAA is chaired by DOTR Secretary Bautista. Thank you, MIAA. The Subic Bay Metropolitan Authority with actual remittance of 3.07 billion pesos, headed by Chairman and Administrator Eduardo Jose L. Alinio. Thank you, SBMA. The Philippine Charity Sweepstakes Office with actual remittance of 2.68 billion pesos, headed by General Manager Melquiades A. Robles. Thank you, PCSO. The Philippine National Oil Company with actual remittance of 2.65 billion pesos, headed by President and Chief Executive Officer Oliver Mario B. Butalid. The PNOC is chaired by DOE Secretary Rafael Lotilla. Thank you, PNOC. The National Transmission Corporation with actual remittance of 2.17 billion pesos, headed by President and Chief Executive Officer Fortunato C. Lainez. Transco is chaired by DOF Secretary Recto. Thank you, Transco. The PNOC Exploration Corporation with actual remittance of 1.99 billion pesos, headed by President and Chief Executive Officer Franz Joseph George Alvarez. The PNOC EC is chaired by DOE Secretary Lotilla. Thank you, PNOC EC. The Clark Development Corporation with actual remittance of 1.80 billion pesos, headed by President Agnes Vicenta T. de Venadera. Thank you, CDC. The Philippine Economic Zone Authority with actual remittance of 1.36 billion pesos, headed by Director General Tereso O. Panga. Thank you, PEZA. The Philippine Guarantee Corporation with actual remittance of 1.14 billion pesos, headed by President and Chief Executive Officer Alberto Francisco E. Pascual. Phil Guarantee is shared by DOF Secretary Recto. Thank you, Phil Guarantee. The Basis Conversion and Development Authority with actual remittance of 1.10 billion pesos, headed by Chairman Delphine N. Lorenzana and represented by President and Chief Executive Officer Joshua M. Bingkang. Thank you, BCDA. The Philippine Reclamation Authority with actual remittance of 1 billion pesos, headed by General Manager and Chief Executive Officer Cesar S. Yador Jr. Thank you, PRA. The Metropolitan Waterworks and Sewerage System with actual remittance of 1 billion pesos, headed by Chairman Elpidio J. Vega. Thank you, MWSS. Those are the 17 GOCCs that remitted 1 billion and above. The Philippine Crop Insurance Corporation with actual remittance of 772.99 million pesos, headed by President Jovi C. Bernabe. PCIC is shared by DOF Secretary Recto. Thank you, PCIC. The Cebu Port Authority with actual remittance of 500 million pesos, headed by General Manager Francisco C. Comendador III. CPA is shared by DOTR Secretary Bautista. Thank you, CPA. The FIVIDEC Industrial Authority with actual remittance of 333.28 million pesos, headed by Administrator and Chief Executive Officer Joseph Donato J. Bernedo, represented by Acting Deputy Administrator Alberto Jude S. Montes. Thank you, PIA. The National Home Mortgage Finance Corporation with actual remittance of 301.61 million pesos, headed by President Renato L. Tobias. Thank you, NHMFC. The Clark International Airport Corporation with actual remittance of 202.91 million pesos, headed by President and Chief Executive Officer Array A. Perez, represented by Vice President Nancy C. Paglinawan. SIAC is chaired by DOTR Secretary Bautista. Thank you, CIAC. The Sugar Regulatory Administration with actual remittance of 190.97 million pesos, headed by Administrator and Chief Executive Officer Pablo Luis S. Azcona. Thank you, SRA. The National Development Company with actual remittance of 156.29 million pesos, headed by General Manager Antonilo D. Mauricio. Thank you, NDC. The LBP Insurance Brokerage Incorporated with actual remittance of 123.77 million pesos, headed by Acting President and Chief Executive Officer Cherry May T. Frederick. Thank you, LBP IBI. The Philippine Fisheries Development Authority with actual remittance of 122.24 million pesos, headed by Acting General Manager Glenn A. Pangapalan. Thank you, PFDA. Food Terminal Incorporated with actual remittance of 114.07 million pesos, headed by President and Chief Executive Officer Lara R. Brusola. The Laguna Lake Development Authority with 105.61 million pesos, headed by Acting General Manager Senando A. Santiago, represented by Attorney Marilu R. Remullar. LLDA is chaired by DENR Secretary Maria Antonia Luyulo Loizaga. Thank you, LLDA. The Mactan Cebu International Airport Authority with 92.45 million pesos, headed by General Manager and Chief Executive Officer Julius G. Neri. MCIAA is chaired by DOTR Secretary Bautista. Thank you, MCIAA. The LBP Leasing and Finance Corporation with actual remittance of 87.55 million pesos, headed by President and Chief Executive Officer Michael P. Arañas. Thank you, LBP LFC. The UCPB Leasing and Finance Corporation with 67.28 million pesos in actual remittances, headed by Officer in Charge Christine Marie G. Cuevas. Thank you, UCPB LFC. The Authority of Freeport Area of Bataan with actual remittance of 66.84 million pesos, headed by Administrator and Chief Executive Officer Muhammad Hussein P. Pangandaman. Thank you, AFAB. The Social Housing Finance Corporation with actual remittance of 63.92 million pesos, headed by President and Chief Executive Officer Federico A. Lacsa. Thank you, SHFC. The Apo Production Unit Incorporated with actual remittance of 53.01 million pesos, headed by General Manager Gil Carlos R. Puyat. Thank you, Apo PUI. The National Electrification Administration with actual remittance of 43.06 billion pesos, headed by Administrator Antonio Mariano C. Almeda. Thank you, NEA. The LBP Resources and Development Corporation with actual remittance of 16.28 million pesos, headed by President and Chief Executive Officer Ricardo C. Juliano. Thank you, LBP RDC. The Philippine Aerospace Development Corporation with actual remittance of 15.02 million pesos, headed by Acting President and Chief Executive Officer Raymond L. Mitra. Thank you, PADC. The Poro Point Management Corporation with actual remittance of 10.49 million pesos, headed by President and Chief Executive Officer Felix S. Racadio. Thank you, PPMC. The Philippine International Convention Center Incorporated with actual remittance of 10.12 million pesos, headed by General Manager Renato B. Padilla. Thank you, PICC. The John Hay Management Corporation with actual remittance of 7.33 million pesos, headed by President and Chief Executive Officer Alan R. Garcia, represented by Corporate Planning Assistant Beverly Gunaden. Thank you, JHMC. The Batangas Land Company Incorporated and Kamayan Realty Corporation with actual remittance of 3.79 million and 3.44 million pesos respectively, both headed by Chairperson Maria Lourdes F. Rebueno. Thank you, BLCI and KRC. The Tourism Promotions Board with actual remittance of 3.62 billion pesos, headed by Chief Operating Officer Ms. Maria Margarita M. Nograles, represented by Deputy Chief Operating Officer Venancio C. Manuel III. Thank you, TPB. The Philippine Mining Development Corporation with actual remittance of 1.66 billion pesos, headed by President and Chief Executive Officer Alberto B. Sipaco Jr., represented by Vice President Lucas R. Vedad. Thank you, PMDC. The Alabang Santo Tomas Development Incorporated with actual remittance of 1.38 million pesos, headed by President and Chief Executive Officer Luis F. Sison, represented by Board Corporate Secretary Roel Z. Babaza. Thank you, ASTD. The NDC Philippine Infrastructure Corporation Incorporated with actual remittance of 946,205, headed by President Saturnino H. Mejia. Thank you, NDC PIC. Finally, the Philippine Rice Research Institute with actual remittance of 530,600 pesos, headed by Executive Director John C. De Leon, represented by Deputy Executive Director Sofia T. Borja. Thank you, PRRI. Thank you, Mr. President, and congratulations to our GOCCs.
Thank you very much to our Executive Secretary, Luke Bersamin. Please take your seats for his kind introduction. Of course, the Department of Finance Secretary, Secretary Ralph Recto, and the officials of the government-owned or controlled corporations, my fellow workers in government, cabinet secretaries who are here this morning with us, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a warm and pleasant day to all of you. I am pleased to be here today to celebrate the invaluable role of government-owned or controlled corporations in the advancement of our society through this year's GOCCs Day. First, let me greet the organizer of this event, the Department of Finance, a happy 127th founding anniversary. Thank you for hosting this annual event. It goes beyond merely recognizing the GOCCs for their contributions to the nation's coffers. This occasion also encourages greater performance and excellence across government corporations that hold a major stake in our country's progress. With that said, let me acknowledge the GOCCs represented here by their heads and their board members. The passion, the drive, and energy that you have demonstrated in your respective institutions have contributed significantly to the growth and prosperity of our people and of our economy. But it is wrong to view GOCCs as mere revenue generators. The truth is, GOCCs are chartered to be service providers first and profit centers afterwards. As such, your value and worth are not to be found in the dividends alone that you remit to the Treasury, but on the services that you render to people. It will also be incorrect to relegate GOCCs to the rear column of government, behind national and local governments. For the truth is, whether financially autonomous or subsidy dependent, GOCCs are public trusts designed to be government frontline institutions. So today, let me thank you for the services that you have rendered and for the dividends that you have remitted. Last year, dividends remitted reached an unprecedented 100 billion pesos. I am sure that we will surpass it this year. And if the amount remitted as of May 3, which is 88.56 billion pesos, is any indication, then we are on track to meet that goal. Since those dividends also come from the people, let me assure you that they will be carefully spent like the precious taxes that come from the sweat of their brow. It will be plowed back to them through projects and programs that will improve their lives today and also create a better tomorrow for our children. It will be invested back to growth-inducing activities that create jobs and harness opportunities. In the end, these dividends will yield more dividends, unleashing a virtuous cycle that lifts up those we serve to a higher standard of living. To put it in the proper perspective, the dividends are not being remitted to the government to be stored, but to help the people. For after all, they are the GOCC's true stakeholders. Our call for higher earnings is a call for efficiency, and this goes especially to the agencies that deal directly with the people. This should not be taken as a license to hike the fees that they pay. The established canon in setting fees and charges that common citizens pay remain inviolable, that they should only be enough to recoup the expenses made in rendering these services and should not be a pretext for profit. To the GOCCs, who by their mandate precludes them from remitting incomes to the public coffers, you can actually help the people by reducing the taxpayer subsidy that you require. But to the GOCCs who render essential services, the government's commitment to fund your operational needs remains steadfast and firm. Whatever the function is, I trust that you will all be practitioners of sound corporate governance. Let every unit in the GOCC sector stand as paragons of dedication to service and innovation, to be adept to changes and adaptable to new developments. To the men and women of the Department of Finance, I trust that you will remain immovable and judicious in promoting the fiscal health and accountability of our GOCCs. Down the road, where your building stands, is the kilometer zero marker in front of the statue of our national hero in Luneta. That is, however, for our road network. But insofar as our country's economic roadmap is concerned, the kilometer zero are your agencies, because projects can only move forward if you have found the revenues for them. Plans remain as dreams. Blueprints cannot move from being just wish lists. Rhetoric can never be a reality unless we marshal the resources. And that holds true for the GOCCs here. Your remittances will not only allow our economy to recover, but it would help cut our borrowings and lessen the pressure to inflict higher taxes on the people. I look forward to seeing a concerted, all-inclusive, whole-of-government approach in our development efforts, one that is true to our vision of the Bagong Pilipinas that we aspire for our people. Again, I thank each of you for the desire and the endeavor to serve our beloved country. Mabuhay ang mga GOCC, mabuhay ang Bagong Pilipinas. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat at maraming salamat po.